As one of the most popular movies of 2025, writer-director Ryan Coogler's Sinners has attracted controversy because Grace, who is played by actor Lee Jun-lee, jeopardizes the lives of many other characters in the film. In 2025 Sinners, Grace is a shopkeeper who supports Smoke and Stack at the Juke joint the night the vampires attack. Though she was part of the final fight against these bloodsuckers in the film, she was the one who invited them all into the joint in the first place, resulting in most of Sinners' deaths. The result of Grace's actions has led to her decision to invite the vampires to become a hotly debated topic. Vampires require invitations to enter buildings in Sinners, so Grace played right into Remic's hands by telling his vampire group they could come in. While the deaths that followed are tragic, especially for the few survivors, it wasn't a decision that Grace made lightly. The controversy surrounding her choice might not make sense to everyone, but it completely makes sense through Grace's eyes. Grace has been blamed for Sinners' mass deaths. Grace's actions have garnered backlash from viewers for inviting the vampires. Grace Chow, Lee Jun-lee, looking worried in Sinners. Image via Warner Bros. After Grace invited the vampires into the Juke joint, both sides engaged in a battle that led to not just Grace's death, but the deaths of Annie, Perline, and Delta Slim. As a result, Grace's actions in Sinners have led to online discourse among people who saw the movie. Though the vampires were responsible for much of the bloodshed, some believe the protagonist's deaths during the final fight were all Grace's fault. Though Smoke and Sammy eventually triumphed over Remick and his vampire clan, the vampires would have arguably had to retreat into the shadows eventually or die when the sun rose. TikTok user @BoopyApe shared a viral post voicing his frustration at Grace for letting the vampires into the Juke joint, calling out the inherent flaws in her decision. In his comments, he argued that Grace endangered the lives of everyone else there out of rage and a thirst for revenge, even after they supported her. Why Grace invited the vampires in? Grace was trying to protect her daughter in Sinners. Remick, Jack O'Connell, has a sinister smile in Sinners. Image via Warner Bros. As shown in her first scene in Sinners at her convenience, Grace doesn't care much for Smoke and Stack. She and her husband, Beau, are simply profiting from the brothers' Juke joint by helping out on its opening night at their request. Based on what was shown in the film, she hardly has a relationship with anyone in the town of Clarksdale. Grace just cares about her family, and Remick uses that to his advantage when he threatens to kill her daughter, Lisa, if he and his clan are not let into the Juke joint. Grace's husband had already died in Sinners when Remick and his clan turned him into a vampire, so the threat that her daughter could be next weighs on her heavily. She understandably didn't want to lose her daughter as well, so she didn't invite the vampires inside for mere vengeance. She was doing whatever she could to keep her child safe from the vampires. Even if it meant sacrificing herself and everyone else at the Juke joint, she wasn't going to let her daughter die. Grace letting the vampires in makes sense for her character. Grace did what a loving mother would do in Sinners. A group of vampires standing together in Sinners. While Grace's actions in Sinners are questionable, it makes sense that she would invite the vampires into the Juke joint. Unlike the surviving human characters at the time, Grace was a parent whose child was in danger. When someone is as loving and protective a parent as Grace, they may throw caution to the wind and do whatever it takes to defend their child. For this reason, Grace was the only one who was willing to risk all their lives to protect Lisa. Also, Grace was still grieving her husband's off-screen death in Sinners when Lisa's life was put in danger. She likely couldn't take losing her daughter on the same night, so she was clinging to whatever family she had left in the face of such overwhelming evil. Whatever went on in her head at the time, Grace's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive when Remick threatened Lisa's life, making it the primary force driving her to let him and his vampires in the joint. Why Grace's actions in Sinners have been misinterpreted. Grace was forced into a situation many other people couldn't relate to in Sinners. It's not easy for some people to put themselves in Grace's shoes, especially when they don't have children and are more driven by logic than emotion. When someone stops to think for a moment, it's unknown if Remick would have actually gone after Lisa or if the latter had already turned her into one of his many vampire soldiers. However, when a parent like Grace sees their child's life at stake and time is of the essence, they may rush to make the decision they feel will keep their loved one safe. Sinners also made it easy for the audience to grow attached to the characters. It would have been hard for some viewers to see the characters they grew to love in such a short time get killed off in the final battle that Grace set off. Thus, Grace made it easy for audiences to direct all their sorrow and anger towards her for indirectly causing the deaths of some of the film's beloved characters. Overall, it is easy to criticize Grace for letting the vampires into the Juke joint and killing her allies in Sinners. However, it should be easier for viewers to see that she was doing what any loving mother would do and trying to protect her daughter from Remick's wrath. Looking back, it certainly wasn't the most logical course of action. However, the fear and love for her daughter that Grace experienced at the time of her fateful decision made her a misunderstood but sympathetic character in Sinners.